Cal Nitro for Nitro Maniac TV's Wrestling Unlimited, and on this by request edition of Nitro Steak, we go back in the Wayback Machine by request via viewer and Facebook fan page member Nip Opalewski over on Facebook messaged me again and asked if I could take a look at the 1991, well, here's the date, November 30th, 1991 Madison Square Garden house show, which was headlined by the main event, the first ever meeting between Nature Boy Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan, the immortal Hulk Hogan, dead center in the ring at Madison Square Garden. This is a very interesting time in WWF for sure. You take a look at it going forward. Take a look at this at the time. Survivor Series had happened about 3 or 4 days prior to this. It was on November 27th, 1991 from the Joe Louis Arena in Detroit. This Tuesday in Texas, which was supposed to be the rebound pay-per-view where Hogan regained the WWF Championship from The Undertaker, was going to occur on December 3rd. So, this is that dead period, that week, where people were tuning into WWF programming and realizing that, holy crap, Hogan lost the belt to The Undertaker, thanks to Flair. They're building something here. And yes, they were. The honeymoon period was in full effect for Hogan and Flair at WrestleMania 8 at this time. It was still a very, very realistic possibility at this time that Hogan and Flair would be in that main event at WrestleMania 8 in Indianapolis at the Hoosier Dome. What we ended up happening, of course, was the double main event, which FKA means a no main event, if you believe the OSW review logic of, I guess, how they review things and that stuff. But I agree with it. With Savage and Flair for the title in one match, and then the quote-unquote retirement match of Hulk Hogan and Sid Justice, and of course this is just so Hogan can go. And I don't think it was Thunder in Paradise just quite yet at that time. I think it might have been maybe Mr. Nanny at that time. I think he had left in 90 for something. I want to say that was Mr. Nanny. This might have been just a whole thing where, okay, he's in Hollywood now. He's maybe shopping around for gigs and that stuff. But anyways, the main event for this one, Hulk Hogan versus Ric Flair. Let's get to it. Let's get through this breakdown. This one is on the network under the WWF Old School tab. Don't look under Hidden Gems. It's not a Hidden Gems. This is actually the WWF Old School tab where they used to put all the old MSG and Boston Garden shows and that stuff when the network first launched back in 2014. And it's still up there. And again, the date, November 30th, 1991 from Madison Square Garden. And the runtime on this card is a nice tidy 1 hour and 50 minutes. And again, my take coming at you right now. Our commentary team for this is Vince McMahon, Bobby the Brain Heenan, and Lord Alfred Hayes. And they are just tight on each other the entire show. It's fun. Kind of miss Gorilla here a little bit because there's a lot more fun with Gorilla on commentary than Vince at this time. I prefer Gorilla and Bobby together because that's a classic tandem. But, Vince and Bobby, very good as well. And Lord Alfred coming in with the one-liners once in a while, too, and such, and just being the straight man as he always was to Vince's stuff. Anyway, the opening contest has El Matador Tito Santana as he starts the road out of the WWF with this gimmick versus Kato. Of course, Kato and Tanaka comprise Mr. Fuji's Orient Express, but Tanaka, I believe, was on his way out of the company at this time. So now you just have Paul Diamond of Bad Company / Orient Express fame, have AWA fame as well. Hard Rock Paul Diamond, if you're a fan of the Team Challenge series of AWA lore. And he's under a mask as Kato at this point. Of course, we talked about the circumstances leading up to this card, and they talked about here in this opening contest a little bit, where they talk, about Taker winning the belt from Hogan, what's upcoming, and that Hogan better focus on Flair tonight because that's a challenge that he needs to overcome at this point. Kato is actually really underrated as a power heel here. One thing unique about this card, I didn't see a lot of manager play other than Mr. Perfect in the corner of Ric Flair throughout this. No Jimmy Hart, no Mr. Fuji, so on and so forth during this thing. It's just an observation that I've seen, but it kind of takes away a little bit from that era of heeldom and us of just seeing the heels that would be associated with certain certain acts and that stuff. The managers aren't there. So the match runtime just a shade over 10 minutes at 10:04, and Santana with the pinfall with the flying forearm. It was what it was. That's an opening contest. Just wish for more out of the former bad company in AWA at this time. But WWF had a habit of bringing in tag teams from the AWA and kind of saddling them with at this point in time, not really lackluster gimmicks, but kind of meh gimmicks, and not really chances at the tag belts or anything, but just strictly my opinion on it. The next contest, the Berserker taking on the Texas Tornado. Berserker John Nord versus the Texas Tornado, Kerry Von Erich. Kerry walks out to the ring. He actually looks, it's not like the infamous Brian and Vinny segment from many years ago and that stuff over on the Wrestling Observer side of things. Kerry actually looks coherent in this one. So, of course, he's on basically the way out the door at this point, the downward run of his WWF run. I think he would make some appearances after the Royal Rumble, and then that would be it. And I have written down here, late WWF run Kerry is always strange to watch, just due to the fact that you don't know which Kerry you're going to get. And again, it looks like Kerry is close to full faculties here. And no managers at ringside, so no Harvey Whippleman, no Mr. Fuji or whatever. The match ends when Kerry slams Berserker's head into the steps at ringside, and Berserker kind of counts out, so a lame finish, or gets counted out, I guess I should say. 2 minutes, the length. Again, Tornado rams Berserker's head off of the steps and rolls inside where he wins via count out. After the match, Berserker paces around the ring and kicks the air as Vince calls this one of the strangest matches he has ever seen. This is just a filler, but it's a complicated, weird. Like you see these two in a ring, you expect more from them. This is probably the worst match on the card for what it is, but it's gimmickry of the early 1990s in WWF. So, our next match, Virgil versus Skinner. So, Virgil, it's Soul Train Jones, the smartest man in wrestling. What a resurgence. Virgil, Vincent, Soul Train Jones, Mike Jones, whatever, has been getting in 2019 in the world of wrestling, and he's been kind of that undercurrent over the past few years there, making with those infamous appearances, the Virgil booth just setting up wherever, and now it's almost like an angle being paid off. We get to see him at AEW events now off and on, and it's cool to see that link from the past. And of course, this is the post $1 Million Man run, so now he's a face. He's a mid-card face at this point, and this is the run of Virgil's career at this point, taking on Skinner. And this is a fairly decent back and forth match, and the crowd actually got up for this one a bit. They are behind Virgil big time. He's still riding the momentum from WrestleMania earlier in the year and a split from DiBiase. Skinner nails a Scorpion Death Drop-esque maneuver for only 2, which was very impressive. Of course, Skinner, Steve Kern, formerly of the Fabulous Ones at this time. Virgil gets the win via roll-up 10 minutes in. Hot crowd for him, decent pop, and yeah, you can tell that they were kind of doing like an Apollo Creed type, Rocky almost esque storyline with him. I just think that he was a victim of maybe just lack of interest in the crowd in 1992. I mean, he's involved in that 10-man schmoz at WrestleMania, and that's about it. At least Skinner got a singles match with Owen Hart prior to the main event. So, next contest is customary in the day. The main event went on in the center of the card. Hulk Hogan versus Ric Flair. And of course, they digitized out the real World's Championship, which was an extra tag title at this point, because the big gold belt on its way back to WCW. Hogan hits the ring hot. Of course, we talked about it. Flair cost Hogan the title at Survivor Series. And this, of course, was a test to see if Hogan Flair could fly for WrestleMania 8. It didn't, sadly, but the crowd at MSG is absolutely, as Pat Patterson would say, banana over this one. Hogan, honestly, with the heel tactics early, and this was surprising. It's common for Hogan back in the day to use kind of heel tactics towards the heels, like eye gouging and rakes and everything, and such, but there's no Heenan on commentary during this match, because Heenan went back to find where Mr. Perfect was, because Perfect didn't walk out with Flair. So it was kind of like, okay, this is weird, what's happening? Now, Perfect would show up later in the match, and Heenan would run back up to the commentary booth and say, oh, what did I miss? What happened? In a classic heel fashion. But, it's something to watch for in Hogan matches from this era, is he out-heels heels in these things. It's kind of very funny. The fight rolls out to the outside and ringside seating. To me, this is the first in a Hogan match from this era that they actually go over the barricade and start fighting in the crowd aisles. This is, hearkening to today's action almost. Hogan is ragdolling Flair throughout this match. There's a fake free count where Flair puts his leg up on the ropes and the ref sees it. After the free, they continue. There's your kind of false pop finish at that point. After Flair grabs Hogan's knee and runs it into the ring post, Mr. Perfect makes his way out to ringside and does the same. The tide is officially turned, and that's what I mentioned earlier where Heenan comes back to commentary. After Hogan fights out of a figure 4 attempt, Perfect throws Flair a set of brass knuckles and nails Hogan for the dirty finish to 1-2-3. WWF officials hit the ring and find the brass knucks, however, and the match restarts again for a little bit, but then there's involvement from Flair and Perfect on Hogan at this time, which constitutes a disqualification. Reverse the decision, DQ for Flair, and Hulk Hogan gets the W. Hogan must pose. Great first meeting, but this left a lot on the table, which it should have. The problem is now that we know the history of this, we look at this as a missed opportunity more than anything else. But, great first meeting. Definitely the match of the night. It was good. As we continue on with the house show portion of the card, we have the Barbarian taking on Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Barbarian throws his cape at Duggan, and Duggan bats it away with his 2x4 and then starts beating it up. I laughed. I love that spot. That was very funny. Other than that, very slow, very boring pace. Two big heavyweights going at it. Duggan gets the pin with a clothesline of all things. The match time on this one is, as I look at the timers here, 7:51. 7:51 for a run time for this. Again, it's just the filler after, I guess, the main event, or the filler after the big match on the card. So, the dark horse match of the night, and the one match that I actually really, really liked off this card, was the IC title contest, where we had the Mountie take on the champion Bret the Hitman Hart. Hitman, of course, returning to the site where he won the IC title at SummerSlam. Bret gets a huge pop, but before the match starts, the Mountie won't let Bret into the ring. He wants to attack Bret with the shock stick, but the big boss man runs out and grabs the shock stick out of Mountie's hands, because they're still working off of that SummerSlam angle and the jailhouse match. The bell rings, got a huge pop. I dug the start of this. This actually got the crowd more into it than Hogan Flair. That's how crazy it was. Kind of cool seeing this match, as this was the initially advertised match for the 92 Royal Rumble, but of course it got changed. due to Hart contracting a flu bug and dropping the title to the Mountie. I think was it Syracuse or Rochester? It was one of the smaller cities in New York. I want to say Rochester because I think Syracuse is where they had the 92 Rumble itself. So if that's the case, then it was Rochester where he dropped it at the house show, I think the weekend before or a few days before. One of the better matches on the card. Both guys kept it very technical throughout, and the Hitman actually got the pin win with the second rope elbow and not the sharpshooter. It was a very interesting finish and a very methodical house show-esque match, but it showcased both guys' abilities, especially Bret, and how much of a quote-unquote shooter he was at that time. I don't think they had anybody in the WWF at that time that could wrestle, at the same level as Bret. Maybe IRS a little bit, but next match, Big Boss Man taking on IRS. IRS enters the ring, does the old tax cheat promo that he did all the time in front of the MSG crowd. A real nice pop for the Big Boss Man. Of course, he sends the Mountie's cattle prod. He's just got the nightstick. It was a really slow prodding contest. By the 13:46 runtime on this match, it kind of tells you that. The Mountie interferes with a knee to the back as IRS distracts the ref. Doesn't work as the Boss Man almost gets the free count off that, but Mountie distracts Boss Man on the apron, so Mountie runs out, distracts Boss Man, allowing IRS to grab the briefcase, knock Boss Man on the head, and get the 1-2 free, and you got your dirty finish from a dirty, rotten heel IRS, at the 13:46 mark. Final match of the night, a tag team encounter between the Nasty Boys and the Rockers. And of course, off the beginning of the match, the announcers talk about the Rockers' miscommunication at Survivor Series, and Heenan believes that they are jealous of one another. Knobs and Sags are out there, sans Jimmy Hart. Again, no managers tonight for an odd reason. I didn't catch it at all. I just don't think that they had any managers booked on this card other than Mr. Perfect. Of course, this is the early days of the Rockers split angle with the seeds being planted at Survivor Series. Mentioned that. One of the better matches on the card. The Nasties are in control quite a bit in this one. Michaels gets beat down big in this one. Then finally makes a hot tag to Jannetty. The match ends with a weird small package spot with Sags and Jannetty that sees them kind of trading pinfall attempts, and then they're kind of rolling around on the mat, and each partner is knocking them back and forth. And then Michaels, in fighting with, I think, Knobs in the ring, kind of falls back and knocks the ball back over. So Sags is pinning Jannetty, and it allows Sags to get the 1-2 free. They would have these little squabbles on WWF TV prior to the breakup. And the final thing we see at the end of the night is a very angry Shawn Michaels leaving Marty Jannetty in the center of the ring and walking out of MSG. So that's it. That's the end of the card, and it's a fun throwback to go back and watch MSG cards from this era back in the day, and so on and so forth, and see how these angles would shape up to some of the bigger angles in WWF history, coming to a really banner early 1992, and maybe the pay-per-view of the early 90s with the Royal Rumble 1992 upcoming, with Flair, the road to Flair finally winning the WWF title in the Royal Rumble match, how that match develops and that stuff. The Rockers split. On the other side, you had Jake the Snake and Macho feuding. You had, of course, an interim champion with The Undertaker now at this point, and so on and so forth. So I give this card a solid 9 out of 10, and I really enjoyed this show from front to back. It is what it is for the early 90s, so you're not going to get, your Tanahashi 5-star classics per se out of this. But it's fun gimmick wrestling, and it's cool to see everybody back in the day with the gimmicks that they had. So anyways, if you have a show that you'd like for me to take a look at through Nitromaniac TV, through the Wrestling Unlimited, and through the Nitro Stake format, my only qualifier is it can't be a pay-per-view. It's got to be one of these, maybe like a television special or a weekly special, or one of the weekly shows like a Raw or a WCW Worldwide or something like that. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter at KellenNitro, or through our email. Our email is nitromaniactv@gmail.com. Feel free to send in your requests through there, or like Nick did, private message us through the Facebook group, and all will be read, and we will get back to you in short order, and we'll probably mark it up on the wall for something to do. I don't really write on the wall, but you know what I mean. To add to the to-do list. But anyways, later days, happy wrestling watching. I'm Kellen Nitro. We'll see you next time on Nitromaniac TV's Wrestling Unlimited.